All right, now everybody take your hand and put it out like this.
Doesn't matter. Put
Yep.
the right up.
Okay, that's a cough. The Hebrew letter cough.
Don't
Open hand.
Don't put it out too far.
It represents allowing or covering. Okay, kind of like this. That's not the letter we're going to do this week. Now take your hand and go like this, as if you're holding on to something.
A spear, whatever.
Yeah, or spear, hammer,
Black
whatever.
Power.
Yeah. That's a yod. That's what we're going to be talking about this week. All right. So the yod is the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It looks like an apostrophe. In fact, when I think this is true. John's not here, so he can't correct me if I'm wrong. But when Yeshua said that something, what was that about?
Jot or a tittle.
Yeah, jot and tittles.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one of those actually refers to the yod.
Yeah.
Because it's
yod.
It's so
Since the
small.
didn't
Yeah.
exist in those times.
It would be. Yeah.
So and
Mira.
Yeah.
yeah, I know. Okay, so the yod it's a hand, a closed hand, but it represents work, deed, or worship. And I think it's interesting that work and worship are kind of connected in the same. Our work is supposed to be a form of worship. I think that's what it originally was, and got tainted with the fall. And I'll get back to that. We have behind me here, it was originally like this, so you can see how you have the arm and the hand. And in Hebrew, pretty much the whole arm is considered the hand. When you read the hand in Scripture, to a Hebraic mind, that can include the whole arm. So so like with you, you often see pictures of Yeshua's crucifixion, and it says in Scripture that they put the nail through his hand, and so then, Christian artists that don't know any better, they say, well, it's a hand, it must be like this, so it's always through the palm. Well, you cannot hang somebody if you put the weight of the person, it would go right through the flesh and stuff. Yeah, but if you put it through here, this would be part of the hand, considered part of the hand as well. And there you can hang somebody. There's bone and stuff, but there's also nerves which would clench the hand so tight that it would actually put fingers through your hand and be very painful. So there's some people who disagree with that, but I don't. Physiologically, I think that that's the way it has to be. It couldn't be through the what we think of as the hand.
The ulnar nerve goes right through there anyway. So.
Yeah. Also, in Hebrew tradition, Jewish tradition, you've seen when they do the prayers and they put on the phylacteries, which is the boxes they put the box on their head, and then they have one for their arm, and then they wrap it around their hand in a certain way of doing it, and it ends up in the hand, and it makes a sheen, and it's really cool. But it comes off of the command to that it should be for frontlets between your eyes and a sign on your hand. Well, if the hand is literally what we think of as the hand, then why are they putting it on their arm right here? But that's because in Hebrew thought, the hand would go all the way up to the shoulder. That's how it's thought. And when we think of hand representing work or deeds, but particularly work, you use not just your hands but your arms, especially if you're a farmer or livestock or anything like that. You're mostly using your hands and your arms to work with. So those two go together. And spelled out, yod is this. Yod, vav, and dalet. So if you did it in order, you could see the work that secures the way, because this is the nail and it's like securing, anchoring. You have work, and then the door, which is path or the way. This is vav. What did I say? Vav. Yeah. Although here it's acting as a vowel. There's a little dot up there. It's acting as a vowel, so it has the O sound. You're not going to get a vav sound or a consonant sound with this, even though it's a consonant. It's acting as a vowel in there. But I usually start with the middle, and then it's a little harder to see because it's like you have a nail, which is security, but then you have work and door. But you have those. You can see all kinds of things in there. You can even see Messiah in there because of the hand and the nail, and he is the door, the way. And you can also, it also makes me think like the nail and the door makes me think of the command having to do with the servants when they became a permanent servant. They were brought to the door of the house, and all would go through their ear.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that picture, and it's showing that even though that's not the hand, that person is going to work for that person now for life. So there's all kinds of things that you can see in those word pictures. That's just some things. Now, in our culture, work is a 4-letter word. In more than one way. I know in our family, particularly with the kids, one of the biggest sources of conflict in our home centers around work and chores, and you don't have to tell you generally. Well, sometimes we actually do, and it doesn't make sense to me. But you generally don't have to tell a kid to play, but you do have to tell them when to work and how to work, and be very specific about that. And we, as parents, we're still learning how to motivate our kids to work, and just even today, like you can spend half the day trying to deal with different issues having to do with, well, who's got more work than others, and I shouldn't have to clean that up because I didn't make the mess, somebody else did, and it was crazy. And
I don't even I still have hair. How long did you say that?
And when work has to be done, then usually the bare minimum ends up getting done instead of it getting done thoroughly and correctly, and so we deal with that as well. And what's true in the family is even more true in even a bigger sense in our culture. And a lot of our problems in our culture and society centers around work. And we typically we go to school once you get past like at least junior high or halfway through high school. You've already learned pretty much everything you're writing, reading, and arithmetic, and the basic stuff that you need to learn to live life. Beyond that, you're learning what you need to learn for some kind of career, and especially by the time you get to college, then you're starting to choose what career you have, and your educational experience is geared specifically for that. And the assumption,
you're almost always wrong.
Yeah. The assumption, and ideally, what's supposed to happen is, by the time you're done, you've done some internships or whatever, and then you go right into whatever job you've studied for. And And often that doesn't
And you
happen
love
with
it.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only do you not get the job that you went to school for, but now you have this huge debt that you have to pay back, even though you didn't get the job that, I think, personally, I think you shouldn't have to pay it back if, school should get you the work. And if they can't get it for you, you don't have to pay them back. I don't know. Anyway, that's my thing.
Really good idea.
So, like, one of the things I would do if I was president. Any votes? Yeah. Anyway, but, and then in our culture, we are valued by our work. When you meet somebody new, once you get past who are you, which we think is your name, and that's not really who you are. It's just what you call yourself and what other people call yourself. But once you get past name, usually the next question is, so what do you do? And they're typically not asking, what you do for, recreationally or whatever. They want to know what your career is. And depending on how you answer that question, I know I'm stereotyping and stuff, or generalizing here in the way I observe our culture. But anyway, typically, depending on how you answer that question, what do you do, will depend on how that person categorizes you and values. They put you in a box, and they think they understand who you are and what you're about and everything based on how you answer that question. And they'll decide whether they like you or don't like you, whether they want to get to know you more or not, and depending on how you answer that question. And yeah.
Networking, is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're going to be a benefit.
Right. And they'll see, especially if it's somebody who themselves has a job, they earn a decent income, they pay their bills on time, they pay their taxes, they're the good citizen. Then if you're not like up to par with them, they're typically going to,
See you later, bye.
yeah. Because in their view, you're either benefiting society or you're a burden to society. So if you're on, if they perceive or they know that you're on any kind of government assistance, now you're a burden on society, and they don't like that. Now you're under a microscope where you have to perform a certain way, or people are going to complain because you're using their money to live on. And what people don't really see is the tax dollars go into one big pot, and it goes to a lot of different things, not just putting your food on somebody's table who isn't working. It goes to buying stuff for the military. It goes to do all kinds of stuff. So like maybe
other countries.
maybe like one or other countries, or this is. So to think, well, you're using my money to live on. Well, maybe like a thousandth of a penny of your, But anyway, we've even experienced, and this, unfortunately, even Christians aren't exempt from this kind of judgmental attitude. We've had friends who have said negative things about people, and what they buy with their food stamps and stuff, and then we're like thinking, do they know that we're on food stamps too? If they knew, do they think that? Do they think that about me? I don't know. And so, anyway, the assumption in our society, I think, is that we live in a country where if you are willing to succeed and you educate yourself and you work hard and you do all the right things, you keep out of trouble and keep yourself clean in other ways or whatever, then you will succeed. And so if you're not, then apparently there's something you haven't done right. And
all,
all.
when you do succeed, though, then all the dogs are out to steal it from you, take it from you, stab you in the back, and knock you back down so they can get your position. So there's more to it than meets the eye.
Right.
And
But-
they lived off of my money for the last 50 years too. That doesn't count.
Right.
You went to the military. That didn't count. Your life. I signed up for Vietnam. That didn't count when I went to the Navy. What does count? You know what I'm saying? Before you become a useless eater, then.
Yeah.
Hitler called it and he killed y'all. A bunch of useless eaters kill them. It just drives me nuts.
We don't realize that there's people who have PhDs that are living on the streets, and there are people.
Physicists who couldn't find a job for 3 years.
Yeah, and so the assumption is if you're homeless, you're stupid, you're lazy, you're addicted to drugs, alcohol, whatever. You're just a lowlife and can't do anything. Well, that's if you actually got to know people who live on the streets, you would know that that's very not true. And there's people who no matter what you do, for whatever reason, you just are stuck. I know I have a college education. I've been in the military, and when I was looking for work, I couldn't find it. You know, for a year and a half, I sent out applications and things, and I couldn't get hired anywhere for one reason or another. I had a handful of interviews that didn't go anywhere. So, and I know other people that's true of too. Just brilliant, hardworking, good people who try to find work and just cannot do it, no matter what. You know, and then you have these idiots that do some stupid dance on YouTube, and they end up becoming famous and making all kinds of money.
So much for working hard. Huh?
Yeah, and so I don't judge them because I'm happy that they're able to be blessed in that way. The sad part is that we live in a culture where that can happen, where you know the people who are smart and hardworking, some of them can't do anything, and then some guy who does some stupid dance or something ends up succeeding just because people that's kind of cool or whatever. Yeah, their video happens to go viral. Yeah, but anyway, that's just the society we live in, and a lot of the problems that we deal with relate to work or the lack thereof. So, yeah, okay, this is before that. Work is something that, what we don't realize is that mankind was created for work, which was good before the fall. I actually think I'm getting ahead of myself with that. So, keep that in your head. I'll get back to that. Typically, we work in order to get the greatest benefit for the least amount of work. We don't like work, and we'll do just about anything to get out of it. And again, I'm generalizing. I'm not necessarily talking about anybody here, but just typically in our culture, this is how we think. And what work we do is to earn money that we use to pay bills and maybe some things that we desire, if there's anything left over, which usually there isn't anymore. We are always trying to meet our own needs through the fruits of our labors. In our culture, I talked about how we're defined by and valued by our work.
Speaking of.
You got a dog that steals the show all the time.
You're killing it, Kevin.
Yeah, and you see that, like, she doesn't even have to do anything, and she steals the show. You know, she just flops on the ground.
Nowhere.
Yeah, that's how it is.
Just give me an example.
Yeah.
People's work ethic.
This is how it should be.
Yeah. We also live in a society that has created machines to do a lot of our work for us. which, now I know that this sometimes, depending on who you're talking to, this can stir some controversy, but which, because of that, leaves fewer jobs available for actual human beings. Of course, then well, there's people who have to build the machines, maintain the machines. Yeah, but you have like a couple of people nowadays. You have machines who make the machines, and then you have like one guy who maintains it. And that typically that machine has replaced the job of like 10 or 20 people at least. And I even have a hard time going to the self checkouts at the store, having been unemployed. I'm like, that machine, as convenient as it is for people, if you only have a couple things to, that's convenient, yeah. But that machine is taking the job of somebody who could be, or like those machines are taking the job of like 5 or 6 people who could be doing that. I'm going to go to somebody who's actually getting, who's a human being getting paid to work. And so, anyway. And then the thought as well, because of machinery, it saves so much money, which brings down prices and everything. But where is that money that's being saved? Is it really, how much of that is actually benefiting consumers? How much of that is just allowing the owner of the company to live in a bigger house or something, And even where it benefits society, I think one way or another, you're either going to pay somebody to work, or you're going to pay somebody not to work. It's your choice. One way or another, if someone is not working and they're on unemployment or whatever, in one way or another, those you're paying for them to live one way or another. I'd rather pay people to work by paying more for the products that I sell. That's just me, or that I buy. That's just me. But the burden to work is placed on individuals to be qualified to work and find work that is available, which is nearly a nearly impossible task for many people. Our society and most of the world is run by big corporations that care more about exorbitant profits, particularly for the people at the top, rather than providing work for the people who need it. So, that's basically, I'm sure there's a lot more that I could, that I or we could say about work and how we think about work in our culture. But main thing is it's thought of in a bad way. We do what we basically work in order to play. We live for weekends because that's when we play. Typically, again, in a general sense. And we don't really, when we work mostly for some kind of physical benefit. Usually, if it's a job, then we're working for a paycheck so that we can pay our bills and take care of ourselves. And then society likes that because then they see us as a productive member of society because we're working. If you're not working, then you're just nobody. So now I get to the WDWS section. What does the word say? Here's where I kind of go back to what I started to talk about, how we are created for work. And work was, people had to work before the fall. Adam and Eve didn't just like sit around and eat apples all day or something. Yeah, before the fall and go, oh, now you got to work. No, it's this. We could read it, I guess, but in
You sure ruined a good thing.
what we read after the fall is now your work is going to be difficult. Now you're going to to live by the sweat of your brow, and and then there's thorns in the fields that make it. He didn't say now you're going to work. It's like, well, now the work that you're doing, you're not, So we don't like work now because of the fall. But originally, it was a form of worship and was then a good thing. We were made for that. We made machines to do a lot of our work for us. Now we have to use machines to give us exercise because we don't work hard enough. Anyway.
So is gluttony a sin?
Yeah.
Well, then why does John Hagee get on stage every Sunday and pound everybody out about their sins, but he's big as a house? Just curious. And I like the guy. I
Maybe
really
he's
do.
got medical issues and that's not over
yes.
But he's been that way. I've been watching
There's
this guy.
reasons.
I've seen him for years.
Maybe he's had medical issues.
Maybe.
And no one's perfect.
Just curious.
If the only people that could preach the word were people
Perfect.
who were perfect,
I guess we
then
wouldn't have
there
nothing
would be
happening.
nobody teaching.
Yeah.
That's true. What?
Not only were we created for work, but more specifically, we were created to glorify God. And in the New Testament, we read that whatever your hand finds to do, do all to the glory of God. So that is our, when people wonder, well, why are we here? That's why. Just read the Bible. It tells you. We are created in God's image for His purposes, and the primary purpose is to glorify God in our work. And we're not created to become rich and famous. We're not created to build huge monuments to humanity or discover the cure for some disease, or I don't know, not that we can't do those things, but that's not what we're created for. We're created to glorify God.
I believe it's Ephesians. Doesn't it say that obedience is our act of worship?
We are all valued because we are fearfully and wonderfully made by God. We read that in Psalm 139. Our value as human beings has nothing to do with our work. In fact, our work is based on our value and being as created by God. So it's the other way around. We work because of who we are as being created in God's image, and God works, so we work. He's a creative God. We create as well. We're made in His image. What He does, we do, but at a lesser capacity. Much lesser. But He doesn't value us because of what we do or don't do. He values us because He made us. If you're here, you know you're valued because He made you.
Saying.
Still could.
Yeah.
The fruits of our labor and the ability to enjoy them are from the hand of God. We read this multiple times in the book of Ecclesiastes. One in particular is chapter 2:24. We plant the seeds, but He brings about the harvest. And then there's all kinds of scripture and commands and stuff about what we do once the harvest. Once the harvest is brought in, or once God makes the plants grow, then we have to go out. We had to be diligent to bring in the harvest, and then you have laws having to do with what we do with that. For example, after bringing it in, there's laws about tithing. So we give some of that to God, recognizing that He gave it all to us. It all essentially belongs to Him, and He's nice enough to give us 90%. There's laws having to do with giving to the poor, so you don't harvest all the way to the edges of your field. You leave that for the poor. You celebrate the harvest. Your main festivals, Passover, Shavuot, and Tabernacles, were all based on the major harvests in Israel. So you're celebrating the harvest that God has given to you, but you're recognizing that He's the one who gave the proper amounts of sun and rain and so on, and made those plants grow. You had to actually go out there and till the ground and put the seeds in there. There is a part that you had to do, but you didn't make those plants grow. If you got plants at the end of the year, that God did that, and so you're thankful for that, and and then you have to be responsible for it. So we do not work for a paycheck or any other benefit. That comes from the hand of God as the fruits of our labor or harvest. When it comes to observing the Sabbath, we tend to forget that along with the command to rest on the seventh day, we are commanded to work on the other 6. The command to work does not necessarily mean work we get paid for. In other words, we are to work whether we get paid or not. We define work by work that we earn money with. That when we look at the Bible, God says, when we read in Matthew 6, do not worry about what you're going to eat and drink and how you're going to be clothed and where you're going to live. Seek first the kingdom of God, and these things will be added to you. So we see there in Old Testament, all over the Bible, it was God who took care of His people. It was God who gave them prosperity and success and health and all those things. His requirement to them was to obey Him, to work for Him. And then out of that work that they do for Him, then He takes care of their needs. They don't work in order to take care of their own needs and leave God out of the picture. They serve God, and then He takes care of them. When Israel was slaves in Egypt, they were forced into work that glorified man. The name Moses was given to tell them was Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, however you want to pronounce that. We see Messiah in the word pictures because of the Yod is hand, and then so the Hey is behold, and then the Vav is a nail. So you see Messiah because of the hand and the nail, and behold, God. But it also shows that their work, the Yod, and suffering, the Vav, was to give glory to God, which is the Hey, not man. So God didn't redeem Israel from slavery so they could no longer work. In the wilderness, God defined their work with the Torah. However, their work would glorify God and not man. So I think that's just a cool picture. Here they're in Egypt working to glorify man. And when Moses is sent to them and he says, well, who should I say send me? God used a name that would indicate to them that the God that is rescuing them is a God that their work is now going to serve Him and not man. They were given instructions concerning proper weights and measures, and maybe a few other basic commands that could be related to commerce, business dealings, honesty, and things like that. But God did not give them instructions on how to do business with other nations in order to make themselves economically prosperous. They were to serve God, and He would feed them, clothe them, protect them, give them land, and otherwise prosper them in the world. I told you when we did the Shema that we would read the verses. I would get to the verses that came after. Oh, my Bible's over there. I'll look this up real quick. I know what it is. So, in Deuteronomy 6, when we do the Shema, we're actually reading at least, I don't think it's word for word. There's a couple things that are changed, but it's basically Deuteronomy 6, 4 to 9. And so if you remember, it's giving them instructions on, hear Israel, Adonai our God, Adonai is one. And it's giving them instructions. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And it's talking about the Torah and writing on the doorposts of your house and in gates and teaching it to your children. And so he's giving them these instructions. That is their work. That he's defining the work that they are to do for him by that. But then right after that, he says, when Adonai your God has brought you into the land he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, that he would give you, cities great and prosperous, which you didn't build, houses full of all sorts of good things, which you didn't fill, water cisterns dug out, which you didn't dig, vineyards and olive trees, which you didn't plant, and you have eaten your fill, then be careful not to forget Adonai, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, where you lived as slaves. So I've read that before, and it never really hit me what that's getting at. They're not going to go, and they're not starting from scratch and working to make themselves prosperous. They're not going to go into some barren land and build cities and houses and vineyards and things like that. And how would they do that as slaves that had essentially, well, they left with the spoils of Egypt, but they used only some of that for building the tabernacle and some other things. They probably were not they were not a wealthy nation. How would, at least not enough to build an entire society. But in serving God, he's going to give them houses that are already built, and wells that are already dug, and vineyards that are already planted, and he's going to take them from the wicked, and they're the ones who actually built that stuff. We wonder, well, we see, and David saw in Psalm 37 and questioning God about it, why we see the wicked prospering and the righteous suffering all the time, it seems. Well, I think sometimes God uses the wicked to build stuff and make stuff.
Yeah.
and then he takes it from them and gives it to those who are righteous. But when we're hooked into a system of working in order to provide for our own needs, then that kind of cuts God out of doing his plan to take stuff from the righteous or from the wicked and give it to the. He says, well, if you're going to work for your own stuff, then I'll let you do what you do it however you want to do it. But when we serve him and rely on him to give us what he wants to give us, then his desire is to actually just give us stuff that we don't work for.
That brings to mind the good stewardship thing. Everything that he's given us, our home, everything that we have, we need to be good stewards of. And that is our work in glorifying him by taking care of what he has given us.
Yeah.
That should be our work.
What he gives us is all, it's all according to his will. And it's not necessarily his will that everybody lives in a mansion and drives a Lexus or something. He defines success in different ways than we do. However, we even see in Ecclesiastes 2:26 that he gives to the wicked, he gives the task of collecting and accumulating things just to leave to those who are righteous in God's eyes. Or Solomon says this too is pointless and feeding on wind, but You get the point. We have not only been created for work, but in particular, work in the kingdom of God. The work is God's work, which we join Him in. As we go about doing the work He has given us to do, He provides our needs. This is okay, and I just talked about that. So, just like I often make the difference between when Israel had to make pyramids in Egypt for Pharaoh. They, especially towards the end, when you read the first chapter of Exodus, they lived in stress because they had to create something that was beyond the resources that they had to make it with. He expected more of them than what they were capable of doing with the resources they had. And essentially that's to me anyway, that's what defines stress. You either have to or you feel you have to do more than you have resources, whether it's physical resources or not. I know when I have to pay bills that I don't have money for, that causes a lot of stress, But that's building pyramids in Egypt. When God told His people to make me a sanctuary, they used the resources that they plundered from the Egyptians when they left, and they had so much stuff that was donated for the purpose that God had to tell Moses to tell the people to stop giving because they had too much. So that's not stress. The work that God requires of us. Now, I guess I have to be careful about saying this, but because there is a certain level where the work it's God's work. So there's in some respect it's work that's bigger than us because we have to rely on Him to provide. At the same time, because He is providing and He is limitless, then the work that He gives us to do isn't like He's not going to require us to make something that we don't have resources to make. Maybe not right now, but we trust in Him to provide that. If we don't have it, then it's not a source of stress because if He hasn't given it to us yet, then it's not part of His will yet to do. Sometimes He tells us to do something and we think, okay, I got to do this now, and we say, but I don't have the resources yet. That's because He hasn't given it to you yet, because He's telling you something that you're going to do maybe, later on down the road, and He'll give you the resources at the right time to do what He requires you to do.
Just like the art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That feature
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he brought to know all the stuff, didn't he?
When I was in the
120 years, is that what it was? Yeah.
When I was in the military, I wasn't allowed to use my own tools on the flight line. I had to use the tools they gave me. So not only did they give me work to do, but then they gave me everything that I needed to do that work. So, and I got in trouble. Well, I didn't get in trouble, but I would get in trouble if I used my own tools for that work for various reasons. We tend to compartmentalize our lives into church, family, work, friends, recreation, etc. To God, everything is meant to be for His glory, which again points to the verse, whatever your hand finds to do, do all to the glory of God. Is the work we are doing or trying to do the work God has given us to do, or is it what we feel we have to do to earn a paycheck and take care of our own needs? I think even the should be I, not it. Okay, I think even the most devout believers struggle financially, partially because we pursue occupational interests which are not in line with God's will for our life. Staying in the Word, prayer, knowing the knowing our gifts and listening to the Spirit are all part of knowing what is what God wants us to do and how to go about doing it. So I think what I'm, it just kind of my observation sometimes, like we have our church life and we have a certain way of thinking when it comes to church and prayer and around other believers and things. But then it's like at the same time we also kind of, and it's almost like one mask that we put on, and then but then at the same time we also have our work mode kind of thing, and we pursue certain things career wise because that's what we have to do to earn a living, and sometimes that's what God has given us to do, and how God chooses to provide for our needs. But sometimes I think that there's other ways that He wants to work in our lives and through our lives. There's a different plan that He has for us that may not involve doing the kind of work that earns a paycheck. And in our society, that doesn't work. Like, if you're not doing work that earns a paycheck, you're not working, and you're you know not, as like I said before, you're not valued in our society. But there's a lot of work that people do that is volunteer work or ministry or wherever it might be. There's a lot of work that people do that benefits this society, the community, whatever that you don't get paid for, and maybe that's the work that God wants you to focus on. And we in our thinking we tend to think, well, I can only devote so much attention to this ministry or this thing that I feel like God is leading me to, because I have to do this other work in order to make money. And I know that it requires some faith to to trust God in that. But if God is leading you in a particular direction towards, and He's gifted you spiritually in a particular direction, I think that's that's what you need to focus on, and let God take care of your needs. Yeah.
For those of you that don't know what your spiritual gift is, we're going to have a class between Hanukkah and the end of the year, so you can find out what your spiritual gift is.
Mm-hmm.
Might be helpful if you don't know what it is.
And you may have more than one.
Yeah, you know.
Oh, sure.
You usually have more, yeah. You have more.
That sounds helpful.
It's very helpful. Because unless you know what you're doing, you're kind of aimlessly just wandering around. Yeah, to me, there's a double fold. You see what the Lord has gifted you with, but then you also see what you need to work on as well too.
Mm-hmm.
So how to develop it.
Now, I have mine tacked up on the wall, and that way I kind of reflect back on it and stuff, and I'll look at it and be like, man, I got to be better in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I don't give as enough. Maybe I'm not helpful enough, or
And too, it can help you know how to pray regarding, God, how do you want me to use that spiritual gift? How can I serve you better? You know, direct me.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what you're working with, it helps.
Well, that's why I said it makes sense.
Yeah.
I've been saying that. Well, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
It also helps you know why you've been attacked in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
more than
Satan's definitely going to attack you where your gifts are.
Yeah. But yeah, I think especially if in the career field, if you're trying to pursue a certain career, or like any career kind of thing, but you run into one roadblock after another, after another, after another, and you're like beating your head against the wall, and you're like, why isn't God blessing me with a job? Well, maybe that's because that's not the path that He's leading you on. And well, what has He gifted you with? Where is He leading you? And go down that way and let Him provide for in whatever way He wants you to. Maybe that means that you don't have as much. Maybe it means that you don't, I'm not saying that necessarily that you're homeless, but there are homeless people who are very devout believers, and that's where God led them in the work that they were given. That's where they were. We had our own Messiah didn't have a job that he earned he wasn't a merchant. He wasn't, maybe he started out as a carpenter, but once he started his ministry, that was all he did. He didn't do anything else to earn a paycheck, and he was fully supported by his followers in whatever he needed. But his father took care of him. I don't think he ever woke up going, oh my goodness, how am I going to eat today, or what am I going to do? He knew that his father was going to take care of him, and he just did what he kept walking the path that his father laid before him. He kept doing the father's will, and God took care of him. His life did lead to a cross, but that was part of God's will for his life. Proverbs clearly teaches us that laziness leads to poverty. God values hard work. We are made for it, and I don't think it will end in the age to come. Our work is to be sanctified, regardless what it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be spiritual to be of God. We always think like, well, if you're working for God, it has to, have something to do with church work or missionary or something like that. It can be anything, but it has to be the work that God has given you to do. Like when I went into the military, when I went in, I truly believed that that's where God was leading me at that time. And so for those 4 years, fixing airplanes was the work that he gave me to do. And then after that, I said, nope, this isn't for you anymore. I have something else for you. I said, great. We want him to bless what we do, but instead we should do what he blesses. And I didn't make that up. A friend of mine did.
I was going to ask you about that because that's something our pastor used to always tell us, like constantly. He'd remind us, don't ask God to bless what you're doing. Ask God to show you what he's blessing. And to do that.
God has a purpose and a plan for everyone, no matter what your abilities, age, gender, or whatever. God has work for us to do. Not only does he have work for us individually, but corporately as well. We just have to make sure we are building God a sanctuary rather than pyramids for Pharaoh.